Kamiyah Mobley was stolen as a newborn in 1998. Her identity was finally revealed in 2017. Kamiyah Mobley. Stolen from the hospital. In 1998, in Jacksonville, Florida, a young mother named Kamiyah Mobley gave birth to a baby girl. She named her Kamiyah. Like most births, the first hours were a blur of exhaustion, paperwork, and routine checks. Nurses came in and out, wristbands were placed on mother and baby, forms were signed, basic questions were asked, everything looked normal. And that normality matters because this case didn't begin with obvious danger. It began in a place people trust more than almost anywhere else, a hospital maternity ward. Hospitals are designed around structure. They rely on routine. Staff members follow schedules, shift changes happen quietly, and new parents are told the same thing again and again: your baby is safe here. That belief is important to understand because it explains why what happened next was so hard to process. Kamiyah wasn't expecting a threat. She wasn't watching for someone who didn't belong. She was recovering from childbirth, learning her baby's face, and trying to rest whenever she could. And on maternity floors, rest is encouraged. New mothers are often told to sleep when the baby sleeps. They're told that nurses will help. They're told that if the baby needs to be checked, measured, or moved briefly, staff will handle it. This creates a very specific environment, a place where parents are tired, emotionally overwhelmed, and trusting the system around them. At the same time, maternity wards are not completely isolated spaces. People move through hallways, doors open and close, staff members enter rooms, visitors sometimes come and go. A person who looks calm and confident can blend into that environment more easily than most people would assume. And that's where this story begins to turn. Because on the day Kamiyah was born, someone entered that hospital with a plan. The woman who would later be identified as Gloria Williams did not appear to force her way in. She didn't need to break a door or cause a scene. What she needed was access, and access in a hospital can come from something simple: looking like you belong. In cases like this, investigators always focus on the same core questions. Who had the opportunity to get close enough to a newborn? Who could move through the maternity area without being stopped? And how could someone leave with a baby without being challenged? The reality is, hospitals are busy. People are trained to respond quickly, and many staff members are focused on medical tasks, not on the possibility that a stranger might attempt an abduction. Kamiyah Mobley was living in that reality. She had no reason to believe the person walking into her space might be lying, because hospitals are not places where you expect deception. But Kamiyah was a newborn. She could not protect herself. She could not cry out for help in a way that would explain what was happening. She could only exist inside the care and decisions of adults. That's why this crime is so disturbing. It targeted a child at the most defenseless stage of life, in the one setting that is supposed to be controlled. And for Kamiyah, those first hours after giving birth should have been filled with simple memories: holding her baby, counting fingers, watching her sleep, imagining the future. Instead, they became the beginning of a case that would stretch across nearly 2 decades. Because somewhere between routine checks and ordinary hospital movement, something went wrong. Not with Kamiyah's love, not with her attention, but with the system around her. And in 1998 in Jacksonville, a newborn baby named Kamiyah Mobley was about to become one of the most shocking missing child cases in Florida. Not because she vanished from a street, but because she vanished from a hospital. After giving birth, Kamiyah Mobley was recovering in the maternity area of the hospital in Jacksonville, Florida. Kamiyah was a newborn, still in the first hours of her life. The environment was busy but controlled, with staff moving between rooms. At some point, Kamiyah was no longer with her mother. In a hospital setting, a newborn may be moved briefly for routine checks, weighing, or basic monitoring. That is why the first minutes did not immediately feel like a crime. Kamiyah waited for her baby to return. When Kamiyah did not come back within the expected time, Kamiyah began asking staff where her baby was. The answers were not clear, and staff started checking with each other. Nurses searched the immediate area first. They checked nearby rooms and the places where newborns are normally taken for routine care. Kamiyah was not found. The situation escalated quickly because a newborn cannot disappear on her own. If Kamiyah was missing, it meant an adult had taken her out of the room. At that point, the hospital began treating the situation as a serious emergency. Hospital staff attempted to determine who had access to the maternity area and who had been seen near the room. They focused on the short time window between the last confirmed moment Kamiyah was present and the moment she was discovered missing. That time window would become the most important part of the investigation. Law enforcement was notified and a missing child case was opened. From that moment forward, the situation was no longer about a hospital delay or a misunderstanding. It was a newborn abduction. For Kamiyah, the shock was immediate and overwhelming. Her baby had been taken from the one place she believed was secure, and the search for Kamiyah began on day one of her life. Once the hospital confirmed Kamiyah was missing, the atmosphere changed instantly. This was no longer a delayed routine check or a simple misunderstanding between staff members. A newborn cannot leave on her own, which meant the situation had to be treated as an emergency from the start. The first step in a case like this is usually containment. Hospitals attempt to control movement through hallways, exits, and staff-only areas because the most critical window is the first minutes after an abduction. If the baby is still inside the building, the case can end quickly. If the baby is already outside, the chances of a fast recovery drop sharply. Inside the maternity area, staff began checking the most obvious possibilities first. They searched nearby room storage areas and the locations where newborns are commonly taken for routine exams. They also checked whether the baby could have been mistakenly moved or documented under the wrong room number. But the more they searched, the clearer it became that this was not a mix-up. As panic spread, the focus shifted toward tracking movement. Who had been seen near Kamiyah's room? Who entered and left? Did anyone appear unfamiliar, overdressed, or too comfortable walking through restricted areas? In a maternity ward, people often assume that someone who looks confident must be authorized, and that assumption can be exploited. Law enforcement was notified and the hospital became the first crime scene. Officers would have started by collecting statements from staff members who worked that shift and from anyone who had direct contact with Kamiyah and the newborn. They needed to build a timeline from memory and documentation, knowing that even small inconsistencies could matter later. Security and surveillance would have been an immediate priority. Investigators would look for camera coverage in hallways, elevators, stairwells, and exits, trying to identify anyone carrying a baby or moving in a way that didn't match normal hospital activity. But even with cameras, hospitals have blind spots, and the footage may not always capture the one moment that matters most. At the same time, investigators would have been forced to consider how an abductor could leave. A person might exit through a main entrance, a side door, or a less monitored corridor. They might leave on foot or be picked up by a vehicle. And if they were prepared, they could disappear into the city within minutes, long before the public understood what had happened. For Kamiyah Mobley, those first hours were not a structured investigation. They were shock, fear, and disbelief happening at the same time. She had walked into the hospital expecting to leave with her baby, and suddenly she was being asked to answer questions she couldn't possibly have prepared for. When was the last time you saw her? Who was in the room? Did anyone speak to you? Did anyone take her? Newborn abductions also create a different kind of public fear. A toddler can wander, a teenager can run away, but a newborn can only be moved by an adult. That makes the crime feel deliberate and calculated, and it makes the community react fast. People start looking at every stranger differently, and every rumor begins to sound possible. As the first day turned into the next, the case became a long-term search rather than a short emergency. That shift is one of the hardest moments for any family, because it signals that the baby is no longer somewhere nearby. It means the investigation is now chasing a person who successfully removed a child from a hospital and vanished. And that was the reality the Mobley family had to live with. Kamiyah Mobley had been taken as a newborn, and whoever took her had done it in a way that left almost nothing behind. The case would remain open for years, with one question at the center of everything. Where did she go after she left that hospital? 19 years later, she had a new name. After the first days passed with no recovery, Kamiyah Mobley's case became what so many families fear most: a long-term missing child investigation. The years continued, the world moved forward, and the Mobley family had to live with a constant absence. But somewhere else, a child was growing up, alive, safe enough to attend school, and completely unaware that her identity had been taken from her. The girl, who was born as Kamiyah Mobley, was raised under a different name, Alexis Manigault. To the people around her, Alexis appeared to be a normal child with a normal life. She went through the ordinary stages of growing up, childhood routines, school days, birthdays, family moments, without knowing that her entire story had been rewritten before she could even speak. This is what makes cases like this uniquely disturbing. Kamiyah wasn't missing in the way people imagine missing children. She wasn't hidden in darkness every day. She wasn't living under constant physical restraint. Instead, she was living a life that looked believable from the outside, because the person raising her had built a world that could pass as real. That kind of deception doesn't require constant force. It requires control of the narrative, a name, a story, a set of documents or explanations that keep questions away. And as long as a child grows up hearing the same story from the same adult, that story becomes their reality. For Alexis, the woman she called mother was the only mother she knew. The bond she formed was real because children attached to the caregiver in front of them. That emotional attachment is one of the reasons reunions in these cases are never simple. Even when the truth is criminal, the emotional history still exists. As Alexis grew older, identity became more important. Teenagers naturally begin to ask questions about who they are, where they come from, and what their future looks like. And in cases involving stolen identities, that is often when the cracks begin to show. Small inconsistencies, missing details, stories that don't match official records, or answers that feel incomplete. Even without knowing the truth, a teenager can sense when something is being hidden. Sometimes it appears as tension around certain topics. Sometimes it shows up as avoidance, defensiveness, or vague explanations whenever the past is mentioned. And over time, those moments add up. Meanwhile, for Kamiyah Mobley, the years were not ordinary. A missing child case doesn't end just because time passes. It stays alive through anniversaries, memories, and the constant question of whether the child is still alive. For families, hope becomes something they carry carefully, because losing hope feels like losing the child a second time. By the time the case reached nearly 2 decades, Kamiyah Mobley was no longer a baby. She was nearly an adult, and the tragedy of that fact is simple. Every year that passed made the gap harder to close. A newborn can be returned and raised from that moment forward, but a teenager has already lived an entire life, formed relationships, built a personality, and created memories that belong to the identity they were given. This case was not only about where Kamiyah was, it was about what had been taken from her without her consent. The right to grow up knowing her real name, her real family, and her real history. The longer the lie continued, the more damage it created, because it wasn't just hiding a location, it was shaping a person. By 2017, the missing newborn from Jacksonville had become a young woman living under a different name. The public still remembered the case, but most people assumed it would remain unsolved forever. What they didn't know was that the story was about to change, not because time healed anything, but because the truth was finally starting to surface. But after 19 years, the truth didn't disappear. It waited. And soon, one test would change everything. Next on True Echoes. In Part 2, a single DNA result would open the case again and reveal a name the world had been searching for since 1998. Part 2, The Truth Coming Soon on True Echoes. For almost 19 years, the story held. A baby stolen from a hospital became a missing child case, and a girl grew up under a name that wasn't hers. From the outside, it looked like 2 separate lives that would never touch again. But lies don't survive because they're strong. They survive because no one forces them to be tested. And soon, someone finally did. Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading. Subscribe and step into the echoes of truth. To be continued.